Panthers get a 5th-round pick. The Ravens receive Diontae and the 6th-rounder that Carolina's dealt them. Bryson, I'll start with you. What were your thoughts when this came down? And then what were your thoughts when you saw the compensation?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised, obviously, with all the messaging from reports across media that, he was being shopped and didn't seem like the happiest person to be in Carolina from just seeing him on the sideline in the game. So I wasn't surprised that the trade happened. Compensation-wise, I was surprised. I mean, what'd they do? Move up like 7 picks, 7 overall picks, and trading him away. And I think it was Sheena Quick that reported that there were 2 other teams involved, and then the Ravens came in at the end and gave the best offer. So this was the best offer that they had on the table for Diontae Johnson, which was, I mean, I can't even comprehend what a worse offer would be. Even if someone was offering you just a 7th-round pick, I still think I would take that over this trade here. But I'm not confident in this front office's ability to negotiate whatsoever. I think we've seen with this trade and others that it's just not a strong suit of Dan Morgan's, unfortunately. So I'm happy for Diontae Johnson that he's on a winning team. I think he's a good player. I don't know. I don't know if I buy into the rumors that he was kind of like a cancer in the locker room, and that's why he was benched, and they were moving on from him because of that. But I think with the words that were shared today from his teammates in Carolina, that he was that veteran leader in the locker room, and a lot of the younger guys relying on him. I think that's true. I don't think that they're just saying that to say it to save face, and it sucks because it's a talented player Carolina have moved off of, a young talented player that they've moved off of again, and I wish he would have wanted to stay in Carolina, but it seems like that wasn't the case, and that's why they felt like they had to get something for him before it was too late. And I don't completely understand, to be transparent, the comp pick situation. I think they wouldn't have been eligible for a comp pick if they were spending in free agency, and they're going to be spending in free agency. So, if you were to leave and sign with another team, they wouldn't have been eligible for that 4th-round comp pick if they continued to sign players throughout free agency. So, when I kind of learned a little bit more about that, I felt a little bit better. But again, you moved up like 7 spots and you traded away a wide receiver who was your wide receiver 1. But I think it all goes back to his want to stay in Carolina. And obviously he didn't want to. So good player. I think he's going to be really good for the Ravens. He's going to help the best offense in the NFL be even better. So we'll see where that takes us. But for the Panthers in particular, I am excited to see Coker have a larger role, Xavier Legette have a larger role. Jonathan Mingo, I'm not ready to completely give up. I'm still holding on to whatever I can hold on to.
Trade that guy yesterday.
Hell no. Yeah, hell no.
I'm not ready, man. I'm not ready. And I don't know if it's the money I spent on his rookie cards or
that's exactly what it is. That's the transparency we're looking for right there, Bryce.
Or being there at the NFL draft and calling the pick when it happened. Curtis can attest to that. I said they're taking a wide receiver, and they did. So I don't know. I got a special connection with him, and I'm hoping that he can turn things around in Carolina because they need it. They fucking need it bad. So we'll see what happens. Overall, wasn't surprised. Was surprised with the compensation though.
Before Ricky jumps in, I'm going to go here.
Is it because you think I'm about to go lay into this one? Is that why?
Well, I know you're going to. I've seen your tweets today. But I want to say this. I was always of the mindset when they traded for him, and you can go, check the receipts on the Twitter account, that they needed to lock this guy up long-term sooner rather than later, like before the season, or 1 or 2 weeks in. And I don't think that ever happened. from what I've seen in reporting. So I think that was their first mistake going into this. Because if they would have gave him a pretty big offer initially, I don't think this would have been an issue this late now. I do also think Bryce Young played a role in this. If Bryce Young played well and was the starter all season, and they maybe have won a couple games, I think Diontae Johnson probably would have stuck around here, and you wouldn't have seen the complaints. So there's two parts to that. I hated the compensation. I am of the mindset, I've always been of the mindset of you always keep your good players. And he is a fantastic wide receiver, one of the best separators in the NFL on a team who lacks separation, and is obviously, like Bryson said, was the number one wideout for this team for, I think, 500 plus yards already. When throwing the ball was pretty outstanding. The whole issue I had with all of this, and me and Bryson, and when we had JJ on Panthers Culture a couple months ago, we talked about this after the episode, and I could not get this out of my head watching training camp in Charlotte. And I think I mentioned it to Bryson when we were at the practices. And I try to pick on some of those little cues that not everyone's looking at. They might see a misplay, and I'm like, well, there was one particular play that Bryce Young had to him in one of the practices. He threw it deep, Diontae blew JC Horn out of the water, had probably a couple steps on him, and Bryce Young overthrew him. And he threw up his hands and was pissed after the play and kind of slowly meandered back to the sideline. Then him and Bryce chatted for a bit, and then they moved on. But it was that little thing, and I told JJ at the time, I said, that is the one thing that worries me about Diontae Johnson coming here, is that little outburst. Is that going to keep going? Is it going to accelerate once the season starts? And we're going to have issues. And I feel like that slowly happened as we saw. Like the first 2 weeks they struggled. He didn't get many targets. He was clearly pissed off. They made the move to Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton comes in, feeds him in the Raiders game. He was happy there. And then it kind of just trickled off from there. And then he made the comments too as well. So like that was always a concern to me. I didn't want to say it kind of publicly because I was just kind of hoping it would go away. One of those things you're like, damn, I know this could get ugly, but hopefully it doesn't. And it came to a head, which was unfortunate because I do think he was a very solid talent and a guy I don't think they would have got in free agency. I think they had to get him in a trade. I don't think he would have wanted to come here. It was clearly reported that, the Chiefs were trying to go and get him, and Pittsburgh didn't want to deal him there. So I think this was one of the only ways they were going to get a guy like him. And I think they screwed up their chance to extend him if they would have done it earlier. And maybe they weren't wanting to do that with the mistakes they made in the past with like Sam Darnold and wanting to see him play and stuff like that. But I think this was the guy you do it to. And I think they screwed that up. And the compensation, I think we can all agree, is not good enough. So I'll leave it at there. Ricky, I'll let you go.
My first gripe is that we keep referring to this as compensation. Compensation is something you get back, fellas. We didn't get shit back. I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to glorify 19 potential draft picks ahead in the 5th round. Look, here's the deal, man. When you're talking about 5th, 6th, and 7th round draft picks, you're not necessarily looking for the highest quality. Quantity is more important in those rounds. Those are lottery tickets. Those are dart throws. The more of them you have, the more likely you are to hit one. If you only have one, you're not very likely to hit on the 5th, 6th, or 7th round draft picks for anything other than depth players. Does it happen every now and then? Sure, absolutely it happens every now and then. Does it happen often? And does it happen in Carolina? Hell no, it doesn't. It just doesn't, man. Like that's the honest to God truth of it. I think that the minute that they said you got to give us something back, Dan Morgan needed to draw a line in the sand. And maybe it's the first line he's had to draw in the sand as a general manager because he didn't do it with the New York Giants. We saw that on Hard Knocks, didn't we? Right? Where he said, here's my asking price. And then they talk him down completely from that. and say, man, I kind of feel bad what we did today. Throw a fifth in there, right? Like they threw a cherry on top. And what we just traded Diontae Johnson for was a cherry on top, but we had to give the ice cream. Like, we give you the ice cream part of an ice cream sundae and you give us a sprinkle. For what? What are we going to do with that? Like, I get it, man. And Curtis, you bring up this really interesting thing. And this is a thing that I think gets overlooked a little bit with this entire trade of Diontae Johnson. First of all, I don't care about the compensatory pick. That there's a huge thing that's being made about that. I'm not sure that we would have gotten one. There's a formula to getting compensatory picks, right? It plays into their annual or average per year salary that they get from their next team, how many snaps they play for that next team, and I believe postseason awards as well. All factor in, and then it's also the ins and outs that you spend on eligible free agents. And not all of them are eligible. They have to be eligible for the compensatory picks. The way that I understand it, and shout out to Mike Kay, the beat writer for the Charlotte Observer, because I asked him about this when he posted it on Twitter, because I had been saying we were still possible to get a compensatory pick. And I think we still technically would be, but the likelihood is slim. And it would have been a 5th, 6th, or 7th round pick. They come in tiers. It starts in tier, or round 3 is tier 1. It's like the top 5 to 10% of the salaries, and then down. But if we were to sign, and this is the way they explained, is that if, Diontae signs for 8 and we sign an edge for 10 million, right? And that's the average annual salary, that cancels each other out. You don't get them. And the problem that the Carolina Panthers have with this entire thing, we got to pay a Panthers tax when we bring in free agents. And you look at the pool of free agents in 2025 that are available for us to sign and bring in, there's nobody that's actually more valuable than Diontae Johnson from a contractual standpoint. So if we bring in somebody, if it's just a 1-for-1, and that's what we're talking about, right? If we bring somebody in and we pay more than what they paid for Diontae Johnson, it's because we made a bad deal again. It's because we had to overpay to bring somebody here. And I get that that's the reality of the situation, but the only way you change your reality of your situation is by changing the reality of your situation, not by just succumbing to it and doing it. Maybe you do have to take it on the chin this year and not go and pay, a C grade free agent B+ money. Maybe you don't do it for a year. I understand that maybe that puts you in a hole and you have to ask not great players to play large roles. What are we doing this year? Isn't that what we're doing? Or didn't we also overpay for guys that aren't playing up to their contract? You don't change that unless you change the process. You have to hit on your draft picks. And that's why I wouldn't have given up a 6 to get a 6. That's what you did, man. The Ravens are going to be on the very back end of that 5th. You might get a 15 picks better. That doesn't mean anything, man. Not to me. I would be more about showing the rest of the league that you can't just walk all over us in trade negotiations, because perception also matters a lot in business. And everybody else, this is why you heard the reports about Chuba Hubbard and J.C. Horn being called about. Why? Because they just put a giant bullseye. It's like that movie where he says, you see the girl bend over, she's got a tramp stamp on the tattoo on the lower back. He's like, might as well be a bullseye. Dan Morgan just showed everyone the butterfly tattoo on the lower back and showed every single person that we are open for business. Come and get it. What we spent $20 million on, we'll give you for $1. Come and get it. You can have it. But the point you bring up, Curtis, about maybe they should have tried to sign him early on and extend him. So that's what I'm most concerned about. Because let's play a hypothetical here and say they did that, right? And Diontae Johnson still gets pissed off because the quarterback play isn't good.
That'd be my only concern.
And that's the alleged, right? Is that he does that. Well, guess what? You don't got an easy out button anymore. You can't hide from that. And who I'm talking about can't hide from that? Dave Canales can't hide from it. Dave Canales would have to sit there and say, I got to put this fire out. But I can't put it out by just wrapping it up in a blanket and throwing it out the window. No, I actually got to save this little baby. I got to figure this thing out. Like, I can't just hide the evidence. So what do? Because if you can't do it, then what are we talking about, man, as far as our head coach being able to build a team? There's always going to be adversity and disputes and people that are unhappy, especially if you're talking about terrific wide receivers. How many times have we talked about what a great wide receiver has just innately inside them? They want the ball, man. They're one of the best to do it in the entire sport. It is a prideful thing that they think they can work anybody across from them, and they want the ball. But if you got a quarterback that's having a hard time, you can't just sit there and say, hey, look, man, 2 weeks in, this is a report. There was a confrontation 2 weeks in. Diontae Johnson was already unhappy with the team. Just 2 weeks in. What conveniently happened in 2 weeks, guys? They benched Bryce Young.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then all of a sudden, Andy Dalton starts force feeding him like he's Adam Thielen in 2023, right? Huge game, gets a bunch of yards. Everyone talks about how terrific he is. And look, I do like Diontae Johnson. I think he's a very good wide receiver. But then when things start going bad again, what happens? More reports about unhappiness and private conversations, miscommunications that result in turnovers. And then that following week, after that report comes out, Diontae Johnson has hurt ribs, a hurt knee. His mom slipped, has a sprained ankle, and he's got to nurse that too. Like every single thing you can think about, he's got going on. But he tells reporters, "No, I can play through it, man. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. I'll play through it." But he doesn't practice all week, and then he's a scratch on game day, and then 2 days later he's traded. I'm just pointing out the facts. I'm not trying to make assumptions, but I'm telling you, you can infer what you want to with that. He had beef, and it's not with the wide receivers. The wide receivers vouched for him and said how good of a leader he is. And that makes sense. Same position room. They learn a lot from one of the best that's doing it right now. And I'm not saying he's like one of the top 10 receivers, but this dude is different than anything we've had in our locker room. He's different.
Mm-hmm.
Especially
I want
for
to ask this.
Guys.
Can I ask this quickly because you made me think of it? What is this ongoing issue, though, with Carolina? I feel like they're one of the only teams in the NFL that every team in the league, and it could be because they're just really shitty, they're the only team in the league that everyone knows that they have no leverage all the time. Like everyone knows their baggage. Everyone knows this was going on. I don't think they do a good enough job to, kind of keep that in-house enough. And it kind of spills out. And then we're sitting here talking about how bad of a trade this was. And that happens time and time again. It makes no sense to me that, because I feel like there's other teams that are bad that still know how to keep that in-house so it doesn't spill over. And you have this, we all know that, Diontae Johnson wanted out the last like 4 or 5 weeks, and everyone in the NFL knew that. Like that is what needs to stop. That's how you control some of that. Because I think it was you, Ricky, maybe on Twitter today, or someone else said, and maybe it was Dunk, where someone had made the point, like, he didn't want to be here. Well, I'm sure there's other guys on this roster that don't want to be here.
100%.
So, like, that's a piss poor argument. It really is. Sorry, you made me.
No, that's a great point. But the leverage part, I mean, how do you get leverage? You have to sell that it's something that you are worth having, right? Like, here's the deal, man. If they called and they wanted to make this deal and they said this is the best deal, was the trade deadline today at 9 a.m.? Was it yesterday at 10:30 a.m.? Was that the trade deadline?
No,
because I missed that. I missed that if that's the case. Because you know what they could have done? They could have tried to create leverage. Like you guys just talked about it. You said we had no leverage in the situation. No, not if you just fold. The minute that somebody tells you you have no leverage, if you just believe them, like imagine that, dude. Imagine going and buying a car at a car lot and then be like, oh, sorry, man, you have a shit credit score. I'm not going to be able to do this for you. And you're just like, dang, all right, yeah, I guess I got to go. But what if you have a good credit score and they just convinced you that you don't? Like, you're just going to believe every single thing that the person who's trying to sell you on something tells you? You have to have something on your own that you are willing to stand on. And this front office doesn't stand on anything. What they could have said is, man, I'm not giving you our pick and then taking on 95% of his salary so that you can have our wide receiver 1 as your wide receiver 3 for a Super Bowl run. I'm not going to do that. No, thank you. Because then everyone else will want a piece of me and all the stuff that I have. And I'm sorry, man. Like, maybe Diontae Johnson is unhappy. Maybe he's inactive. Maybe he's sitting on the bench. Okay. But maybe we don't look like a bunch of jackasses and are the laughing stock of the league. Once again, only 8 weeks in with a new regime and a new head coach, but it is business as usual in Carolina.
And what's that going to cost you? And what's that going to cost you? 15 spots in the draft?
15 spots in the draft and what, like $630,000?
Yeah.
That's it. That's what we did that for. We sacrificed all of our pride and potential leverage and well-being in future deals for that.
Well, and going off of that too, and you talked about timing, and this is kind of what irked me even more about it. This trade happened like 2 or 3 hours after the Houston Texans put Stephon Diggs on IR. So you had a team who was probably going to be a suitor or for a possible trade candidate, and you traded him hours later. Like, what
and you had another,
doing
and
here?
you had another weekend slate of
Yes.
football games that somebody else could have gotten hurt. Imagine this. Imagine the Texans lose Tank Dell this weekend, and Nico Collins is the only one, and he's coming off of a hamstring injury on IR. You think they wouldn't have said, "Hey, we'll give you a fifth, and you don't even have to give us your picks. We'll give you a." Of course they would have. They're going for a title. What this was people putting out feelers, and Dan Morgan took those feelers and panicked and was like, "We got to do this. I don't want to end up in a Brian Burns situation where we give up all this terrific capital of a 6th-round pick when we're going to end up with a 7th." It's a different ball game, dude. You can't be nervous about the fact that Scott Fitterer lost 2 first-round picks and then you got fleeced later or got over on. Maybe I won't say the word fleece because I know that makes everybody's panties really tighten up on them. So let me not say the word fleeced. You got over on. Again, you got dog walked. You turned into a doormat, if that makes you feel more comfortable. Those euphemisms work better for you. Either way, you got taken to the woodshed, and we're supposed to just feel good about that because you got something in return.